So hello everybody and welcome to the last panel of the day in this magnificent day, and I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to this discussion. In the context of open banking and open finance, there is much to explore in some detail, and we're going to be looking now at open and interdependent ecosystems. Fantastic panel discussion with fantastic panelists. Let me introduce them straight away. If I may, I'll kick off. My name is Julia Streets. I'm the founder and the CEO of a business called Streets Consulting. We advise businesses from the smallest startups to some of the world's largest financial institutions, right the way across the world of fintech and indeed internationally as well as in the UK. But not enough about me. Let's introduce immediately our stellar panel. I'm delighted, first of all, to introduce you to Kate Bohn, who is the Innovation and Strategy Lead at the Incubator and Accelerator at Lloyds Banking Group. Kate, wonderful to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Julia.
Fabulous. And now let's move on to Clare Reilly. So Clare Reilly is the Chief Engagement Officer at PensionBee. So Clare, great to see you.
Hi, everyone.
Also joining us is Majeed Suleiman, who is the FinTech Lead of Digital Ecosystems at AIB. Majeed, great to see you.
I was delighted to be here. Thanks, Julia.
No problem at all. And last but not least, now we may not have just lost the camera, but I'm hoping that we can hear her, is Charlotte Hausemer, who's the Vice President of Innovation and Product Development at BNP Paribas. Charlotte, can you hear me?
Hi, everyone. Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Charlotte, we're going to continue with the panel. We can't see you at the moment, so hopefully you'll get your visual back shortly. If not, it might be worth logging back in again, and I'll make sure we come to you with the first question as well. But let's get straight into it, because I really want to understand, for the benefit of the audience, what open finance really means to you in your roles and in your organizations today. So let's start with that. So Kate, let me come to you first for some opening thoughts.
So opening thoughts, open banking, open finance. I mean, fundamentally what we're trying to do is bring the relevant activities and information to people through the channels that they wish to receive them in. I am deeply passionate about democratization of access and understanding, whether that's financial literacy or just, enabling everybody to have a seat at the table, a voice at that table, and make sure each of those voices is respected and given the same amount of value. And I think open banking is a great way for us to enable that.
Wonderful. And great to kick off with the ultimate purpose, why this matters, because we can get sucked into a whole discussion about, ecosystems and APIs and collaboration. But actually what's great is to kick us off with actually why it really, really matters as well. Thank you, Kate, for those thoughts on that. And let me just bring in then Majeed. So from your point of view, from AIB, explain to us about your role and what open banking means for you today.
So I'm FinTech Lead within the Digital Ecosystems team in Allied Irish Bank based in Dublin. Our focus is very much on the retail and consumer side of banking, along with serving our SMEs. I suppose open banking, open finance for us, and I suppose what we're focusing on for now is where we can collaborate in the open banking space to sort of, I suppose, develop some of the numerous use cases, kind of to Kate's points, to bring to our customers along, within relevant channels to reduce friction, for example, when applying for a mortgage or for a credit application. And we're quite excited by it, and I think it's an area of growing importance. And I think once people become more aware of it and the power of it, both within banking and more importantly our customers, the more you'll see solutions proliferate across the industry. That's kind of my role. And
wonderful, thank you. And already we're getting into a few sort of use cases there about mortgages and applications of retail, etc. So kind of drilling down into some real life cases there, which we'll definitely be coming back to for sure. Charlotte, may I come into you next? In terms of your role at BNP Paribas, what does open finance and open banking mean to you right now?
Yes, sure. So I'm in charge of innovation and product development for CIB Americas. So I'm based in New York. What we do is that we help treasurers of large corporations, with their working capital solutions. So anything from cash management payments to trade finance and liquidity, short-term deposit. How it translates today, in my day-to-day, I would say into two parts. The first part for us is to of course, enhance the product offer. We do fintech partnerships. We look at what is happening in the market to help our clients to have more transparency, a frictionless experience. And on the other part as well, it's a lot about what I call digital transformation. It's a bit of our internal cuisine, but behind the scene, of payment and working capital solutions, it's a very complex infrastructure, which requires a lot of resources and API transformation, a lot of IT transformation. Mm-hmm. So we are looking at that, and it's all about interoperability, APIs, how we can enable legacy system to work with new systems, those type of things.
Wonderful. And we'll be drilling down into that for sure. And I'm sure a lot of that's also been talked about throughout the day as well. What's fascinating there, of course, we're talking about, perhaps some people have been talking to retail end, so that's consumers of financial services and the appetite for greater financial inclusion. But there, of course, the infrastructure really matters. The ability to get business done through trade finance and corporate B2B channels as well really, really matters. So wonderful. Thanks, Charlotte. And great to see you back as well, camera-wise. All crystal clear. Thank you. Now, last but by no means least, Claire, let me come to you and ask you the same question, because you come at this from a slightly different perspective.
Yes, we do indeed, actually. So I work for PensionBee, and we're an online pension provider. And we were founded back in 2014, and we try and tackle some of the huge challenges that consumers face in the UK pensions market. So that's multiple pots they've lost track of as they've changed jobs throughout their career, opaque fees, lack of ownership over their savings, but also sort of feelings of confusion and apathy that many people feel about saving for their retirement. And here at PensionBee, I lead on our customer engagement work. And so I drive forward all of the customer-led product initiatives. And so most recently, that was our fossil fuel-free pension that's launching this year. But back in 2018, I helped launch all of our open banking integrations across Yolt, Emma, Starling Bank, Money Hub, Money Dashboard as well, where our customers could bring across their live pension balance and all of their transaction history into those apps. So for the first time, they were able to see their pension balance alongside all of their other balances. And so that was kind of the first time I think that we'd seen pensions featured in the picture of complete financial health, which is really kind of the vision now for open finance. And since then, we developed our API, and the next step really is to combine all of this data to help set up auto top up and auto sweeping of pensions. So we've been pushing for pensions to be part of open finance for many years now, and we've done a lot of research into the viability of open finance developing in parallel to the pensions dashboard, and which we've been sharing recently with regulators and government.
And it is fantastic to hear you talk about that, because I mean, it just feels particularly salient right now as we're going through, large corporates perhaps not faring very well, and questions about pension fund availability. And I'm thinking obviously about the Arcadia Group. We're not going to get into that today, so don't worry. But actually, there is an enormous amount of opacity about pension pots and how you can bring all that together, let alone alignment with our personal finance realities and ambitions as well. So that's fantastic. Well, so what comes out of that for me is, I host a lot of conferences about open finance, and we've touched on financial inclusion, we've talked about corporate structures, we've talked about the ability to enable, we've talked about mortgage applications and also pensions as well. Is there's a very clear message about the need to change. And there's also a real willingness to change. And as you were saying, Claire, a kind of regulatory appetite to change as well. I guess, what I'd really like to get into in this section is kind of, so what needs to change and why? And also, how do we accelerate the pace of change as well? So from a banking sort of corporate point of view, Charlotte, can I come to you first of all? I'd love to hear your thoughts on what needs to change, why, and how to accelerate it.
Yeah, sure. Many things need to change. I would say open finance and open banking really impact the whole value chain for banks and customers. So it goes from the front end to the back end. Again, I don't want to talk only about IT infrastructure. I think in addition to the data sharing that it's all about, sharing data and open the data and protect them as well for the end customer. One of the very big challenge we have as well is that the natural ecosystem, finance ecosystem, is not naturally inclined to share data. That's not our core. We were not built to share data, let's face it. So now it's all for me about mindset changing as well, and collaboration and those type of things. I see technology as an enabler for sure. It's going to help us to go forward. And of course, data is key, and we're going to make those changes with APIs, blockchain, AI, all those technologies. But I see here that one big challenge I can highlight here for the panel is mindset. Try to collaborate more, and I think it requires it's a pretty big change for the finance ecosystem. I'm sure you all agree here.
Absolutely, and the need to be able to collaborate around that, and also get everybody aligned in not only their appetite and their models, but also their pace really matters as well. Thank you, Charlotte, for kicking us off on that. What I'd love to do now is from a startup point of view, because everybody talks about startups agility. Claire, let's come to you next of all. So what needs to change, why, and how do we actually get momentum moving fast?
Yeah, I think what you need to be pretty agile, I think, is the answer to that one. Because I think from the startup world view, there are just still too many different types of obstacles in place to getting these collaborations up and running successfully. So difficulties around mindset, as Charlotte's spoken about. We ourselves have attempted to complete a supplier onboarding process with a big financial institution, and I can personally, I'll never forget the pain involved, with trying to get every tiny supplier in our supply chain, including those with, I think, contract values of around $50 a year based in the US, to agree to comply with UK modern slavery legislation. Otherwise, we'd be blocked from moving forward with all of our other work streams. So, mindset is definitely an issue, but I think there are some bigger issues with architecture as well. So what we hear all the time from sort of the players in the open banking startup community is that there are still too many user experience and process barriers that are impeding kind of wider spread adoption of open banking, and they're not putting the customer first. And I think they're hindering rather than promoting real innovation. So we hear about the 90 days reauthentication again and again, causing really high attrition rates for startups. They worry about premium APIs, charging, for access to the financial data that belongs to customers, around data sharing rights, service level agreements around APIs. And I think the main one is too many cooks as well. So, we've now got, the open banking implementation entity. We've got the FCA's open finance call for input, which I hear got over 170 submissions. We've got CMA's digital markets unit, open banking team there, ICO, review of payments from Treasury, and then, of course, BEI's smart data review. And I think, what we really need is some coherent government collaboration on this issue. And I'm pretty sure that's been well covered today. But I think, just to conclude, I think it's not just mindset, but I think there are kind of structural issues that are preventing real innovation from happening from the startup perspective as well.
And it is interesting, isn't it? Because, we've got so much regulatory and policy support in many ways and interest. But it's almost, when you say that the too many regulatory cooks, maybe. And so to spend some time looking at that would be really fascinating. I have a feeling that's probably a panel in and of its own right. But it's almost like a luxury problem to have so many people who are keen to drive change. But we need them to perhaps arguably to step out of the way or to align more closely. Fascinating. So Kate, can I come to you? From an ecosystem sort of point of view as well, thinking about, I mentioned in my opening remarks that you're the lead on the Incubator and the Accelerator scheme as well. Accelerator obviously being the heart of your title. So what can be done? What needs to change? Why?
I think, coming back to Claire's point a little bit, we in the banking world, we are highly regulated, and therefore there is a low risk appetite. And traditionally there has been a low risk appetite. And our systems of getting partnerships up and running, where we have it, has been used to large strategic engagements that are multi-year activities with the likes of sort of IBM or Google or whatever, where, do you have 5 years of audited accounts? Do you have other customers? How do we understand from a sort of operational resilience perspective, we're not stepping into a black hole? Because from a regulatory or risk perspective, that's not something that we want to do. We don't have a common lexicon, a common language at the moment to speak about. When I say a proof of concept, do you talk about the same thing, but you say pilot, and those kind of things? So what is a proof of concept? What is a hypothesis test? What is an experiment? All these words that we use in the agile space, we use them very freely, but we don't often check that when I use the word and you use the word, we're actually talking about the same thing. And then from that, we have to bring in And that's us sitting in innovation, right? And then you have to bring in the lenses of legal and risk and compliance and onboarding and sourcing and the business and all those different people who equally probably haven't heard the language much before, or they're beginning to become familiar with it, but they've probably got a different take on it again. So the language is difficult. We have no golden source of truth in terms of what things are, what kind of data we use. And then also from the onboarding piece back to Claire's piece, you know, we can't present the same documentation and the same governance to an experiment or a hypothesis inquiry that says, I think it's this, but let's just do some extra testing for a couple of weeks, for a couple of grand with a small entity who knows it really well, all the way through to we're going to be running some sort of pilot with real data and real customers. You know, there are different levels of risk, there are different levels of access, it's different timeframes being involved, and fundamentally different partnerships being created. And we don't yet have that quite worked out. So we've almost started to run before we could walk. But we're unpicking it now. And I think everybody absolutely has a desire to make it work. And we're trying to be really clear and transparent about where the pain points are so that we can move towards solving those more quickly.
Mm-hmm. And very shortly, we're going to move on to a section in this panel which talks about what you're doing in your short-term, medium-term focus. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what thinking about in order to address some of these fascinating challenges about what needs to change. So Majeed, let me come to you as well. I'd love to, your thoughts, because I know from a corporate point of view, you're really sort of thinking about the digital ecosystem, the bank ecosystem. So talk to us about, again, also about sort of why and
so notwithstanding the comments from Charlotte, Claire and Kate, especially on mindset, which I massively agree with, especially I working in incumbent, so I feel your pain, Claire, even though we're dishing out the pain when we're trying to onboard a fintech to partner with. But I don't think it's strictly just a mindset that needs to change. It's certainly part of it. I also think that as further commercial and customer centric in sort of incentives come to light, that will accelerate change. If there's a commercial reality behind something, if something, a particular use case that leverages open finance / open banking is quite profitable or could be quite profitable, and you'll see the industry changing quite quickly, or at least trying to. There's a huge amount of inertia in banking across Europe. And I think one way to sort of swing that inertia going the other way is through, leveraging the focus of banks who are customer centric, like ourselves, or shifting to be more customer centric, to use cases that kind of fit in within that and have a commercial and profitable slant to that as well. Banks will find ways of monetizing open finance and open banking. That isn't a particularly bad thing. I think that is something that needs to happen in order for change to happen and to sort of shift that inertia.
Wonderful. Thank you for your thoughts on that. And I think that's a really sort of really frames kind of what the what needs to change and why. And what I'd love to do now, as I say, is get into sort of what are you focused on in the short and the medium term as well. So when we talk about, what does this mean for you in terms of today, short term? When I say short and medium term, I'm thinking sort of 2 to 4 years to address some of those challenges that we've just outlined there as well. Claire, let me come to you first of all, if you would. I'd love to hear what you're kind of thinking about.
So I mean, obviously, we look at this through the prism of an industry that's worth around half of all household wealth in the UK, so around 7 trillion to be precise. And it's a product held by around 50 million people in this country, but where there's absolutely no standardized data available in digital form, and an industry that still solely relies on paper and post to send updates to savers. We also have now around 20 million abandoned pension pots in the UK, and this looks set to double in the next 10 to 15 years. So, we've really got no sense of ownership, and chronic undersaving as a result of people just not having the data or tools they need in order to be able to plan or to make those contributions to get the retirement that they need and deserve. So I think when you balance that with the kind of potential for consumer harm and people not being able to get that information, then, there are some huge negative consequences for the whole of society if we have this kind of retirement catastrophe. So I think for us in the short and medium term, we don't believe that open finance can truly be a success if that doesn't include pensions from the outset, because open finance is about helping customers make the most of their money and empowering them to lead better, happier financial lives. And so I think really when we look at the scale and the reach and impact of pensions, then they need to be staged first. And if not first, early, because when we think about the limitations, there's obviously a huge amount of work to be done. The dashboard has begun to do the beginning of the heavy lifting because they're trying to get 40,000 legacy pension schemes sharing data through this pension finding service. But what we're calling for is, in parallel to that, in the short and medium term, is for the 12 biggest providers by pension data, so similar to the CMA9, be mandated to open up the rich flow of pension data that they already have, because they already have digital records and they have newer types of pensions often, and they account for around 80% of defined contribution entitlements in the UK. And we believe that opening up that data in parallel would give the bulk of the population the data they need now early enough to make a difference. And I was recently on a panel with someone from Scottish Widows who showed us all of the amazing work that Lloyds Banking Group are doing to bring pensions alongside bank balances in the Lloyds Banking Group app, and to show people, I think, in the presentation, I was showing that they've been able to show pension balance to banking customers more than 100 million times in the last year. And that's really how we build ownership over pensions. And I think, Lloyds Banking Group are really kind of a leading light in this. And sadly, there are not many leading lights in kind of people taking steps forward to link pensions to wider open finance. But it's fantastic to see that scale, the work that they're doing to drive up levels of ownership and engagement in pensions. And we need to see more of that happening in the short to medium term.
It's very exciting, isn't it? It really feels like we're at kind of a pivotal moment where you can unlock not only knowledge, but also empowerment as well, which is fantastic. So what I'm naturally doing is come to you next to respond to the compliments you've just had thrown in your direction, but I won't actually. I'm going to go to Charlotte, because I know in a second. But Charlotte, I'm really keen to, from BNP Paribas' point of view, when we talk about some of those corporate structures, you can't underestimate the enormity of the challenge that sits at your feet. So we'd love to hear about really kind of what some of those challenges are, and what your short to medium term focus is.
We have a few. If I highlight them on the treasurer point of view, because they are the clients, so I like to outline this, what are their key concern. First, as Claire said, in her activity, in her industry, we have a lot of paper as well. Legal documentation, it's something that we are looking at. So anything regarding e-contracting, e-signature, that's big. It's some standard, but that's something we need to deliver on. Then paid and get paid, instant payment, virtual accounts, all of that around payments and reconciliation, which are key for the treasury of businesses. And right now during COVID, it's even more important for them to have, seamless reconciliation and have visibility over the cash. So that's the last part about visibility, how we can offer them the view and the visibility of their cash over all their banking system and partners. So it's all about consolidating data from many sources. So that's what we are looking at. So it involves partnering, of course, with providers, with new technology providers, because we have some POC ongoing with blockchain, because it could be pretty interesting for the payment space. But we have as well some more other initiative on electronic banking, which are important as well, because they bring in everything in one place. So that's what we like to provide to customers right now.
And I love these kind of conversations, because there's so much that is actually quite common, which is just the simple demands for a single source, have everything beautifully aligned. But of course, the scale and the enormity and the complexity are very, very specific as well. And it's wonderful to hear, even just under the simplicity of e-signatures, it's one of the things we've talked about most this year, which is actually the amount of physical paperwork that had to be signed within the financial markets, capital market system is just extraordinary. and how that has to be pivoted as well. So thank you, Charlotte. Thank you for your thoughts on that. Really, really interesting. And so Majeed, let's do it, if you like, a kind of ratchet shift over to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts about, in the world of business and also retail banking, particularly, building on what's gone before, is what are you particularly focused on?
So in the short term, we're kind of seeing how we can leverage open finance in our personal and business customer day-to-day banking journeys. And, again, I'm going to say reducing friction within those journeys, but also, I suppose, enabling, I suppose, certain data transfers and certain use cases to be delivered. So, for example, I think on the business side, with SMEs, much of the focus is on how can we enrich the data that they are getting on their side from various different, accounting systems and so on, and how can we help them make better decisions to run their business. And then on the personal side, it's about, kind of to Claire's point, it's about giving people the power to make informed decisions, and then also at the same time, allowing them to place more importance on what really matters to them and their goals within a savings account, within a current account, or within an investment account that they might hold with us. I think that moves into the medium term, and from that we can drive adoption, and we can go from just addressing friction to addressing certain gaps within our product propositions, and certain gaps within our product propositions that don't serve the financial needs of our customers. And I think open finance is a great way for us to move from where we are today to what our ambition is, and that is to be at the center of our customers' financial lives. And that goes beyond just day-to-day banking. That goes into their saving, that goes into their pensions, that goes into their investments, and that goes into how we can help them make better decisions and, I suppose, live their lives in a much more better way when it comes to their money.
Fabulous. Now, Kate, you've been waiting very patiently because Claire was talking at the beginning about how the work that Lloyds is doing. Also, listening to what Majeed was saying about, kind of removing friction and very much kind of putting the customer at the heart of the customer-centric ambition, if you like. I'd love to hear, so what are you thinking? Obviously, with the view particularly on your ecosystem as well. It's very strange, Claire. Kate, we've lost your sound, which is really interesting. So you've thrown a compliment and now you can't respond to it.
Rest assured.
We can hear you very well.
So it's been really interesting. There are some things that I can't talk about, obviously, but in terms of the piece that Claire's been speaking about, the insurance and wealth guys who sit under the Scottish Widows team and David McClay are amazing. They are so focused on value and functionality first, and the tech is second. It's like, what are the problems that we're actually solving, and are they problems that anybody cares about enough to solve, either from a financial value perspective or from a user value perspective, or the education piece, as Majeed was saying. We obviously need some grit in the system. There's nothing worse when you hit delete and you don't get asked, are you sure? Just before you delete it forever. So we need some of that grit in the financial system. And I think one of the lovely things that's been happening over the last few years, as we've had that democratization of access and understanding, is the language has changed within banking. We don't so much talk about mortgages when we're engaged, or products per se, when we're engaging on the retail side of things. We'll talk to them about, buying a house or buying a car, although behind that is loans and mortgages. That's not how normal people speak. From a pension perspective, we don't necessarily talk to them about saving for their pension. What we talk about is, how do you want to live when you're 65, 70 years old and you're no longer working 5 days a week or whatever it might be? And if that's your aspiration and that's your desire, how are you going to afford that? And from that, you can shoe in a pension. So it's making the understanding of the sort of the framework of the financial services system. So take out banks and just understand the financial services as a whole seeps into every area of your life, whether it's your ability to pay with a contactless for your newspaper, or to do something online or whatever it is, everything is intertwined, and we definitely need to keep moving in that direction, so that when we talk about the different things that we're enabling, the people that we're actually trying to speak to don't just switch off because they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, I don't understand it. And you talk about a product, or you talk about a derivative, or whatever it might be, whether it's in the commercial bank, the retail bank. You know, we've got Lex Leasing, we've got Black Horse Insurance, we've got Scottish Widows, we've got Halifax. You know, there's so many things, so many brands under our group. I think the lovely thing for me is that I get to dip in and out of that, and you can join up the dots in the same way that your users do, because as much as somebody in the investment bank is having a conversation with a chairman or a treasury person within an FI client, a financial institution, that same person is also potentially a retail customer who's really frustrated that his daughter got turned down from a credit card, or whatever it might be. You know, that interconnection that happens, you know, we get a really strong view of it.
And there's so much that is so deeply personal, but also so architecturally complex, which is fascinating. And also, I'm listening to you all talk about the complexities of big corporate structures, wholesale corporate structures, and how they get interpreted and roll out into, exactly as Majeed was saying about, you know, kind of removing friction for customers, as well as begin to unlock opportunity in the world of pensions, and also how all of the different lines can come together and all sort of feed each other. Is really, really fascinating. And this stuff is you know, is easy to talk about, but deeply complex to deliver. What I'd love to do now is actually, let's look a bit beyond and ahead. So when we talk about the concept of open finance, we're obviously talking about, you know, sort of financial services world as well. But I wonder, and it's often talked about, you know, in open finance, we think about, you know, kind of being able to align with utility providers as a natural example as well. I'd love to sort of see or hear from all of you about, where do you see the greatest potential, and what impact do you think that might have? And Kate, I'm going to stick with you first. Why don't you kick us off in this section?
So I think we're going to end up in a place where actually you get what you want where you want it. So whether you want your content and your financial life and interactions delivered to you via Facebook or Google or Amazon or whatever it might be, I think fundamentally that's where we're heading. We will absolutely end up in a place, I believe, where brand is almost irrelevant, because actually what you're doing is you're amalgamating everything into your preferred location. And whether that's multiple API links from Barclays and Lloyds and NatWest and whoever else, and your pension, you know, PensionBee as your pension provider, where again you've plugged in 1,000 different things, it won't. I think the concept of a bank will no longer exist, but people will be much more in touch with their financial lives.
Fabulous. And of course, the natural link from there is to go to you, Clare. I mean, we're talking there specifically about pensions, but it's about being much more engaged in your financial life. I mean, as you look ahead, Clare, and you're thinking about you know, the enormous potential that lies beyond the pension, the capabilities of pensions, and also what we're going to spend our pensions on.
I mean, I think the big potential we see are the use cases that are going to have maximum reach and impact on tackling kind of the big consumer detriment we see. So when we look at the FCA's financial life survey, I think there's some really important data points around customer vulnerability. So around mental health and issues such as kind of relationship breakdown or housing issues, insecure employment, and the impact that those have on people's financial situations, and how we can use finance to sort of tackle them. So that's kind of the millions of people in the UK that are relying on high cost loans, over indebted, and making sure that we've prioritized those tools that help them break the cycle of debt. And then I think in parallel to that's financial literacy. So it's giving people what they need in order to become financially resilient and understand how those products, the products they use, the financial products they use, can better interact with each other. So that's closing the advice gap through kind of financial planning tools, accessibility for people who may have been traditionally locked out of like mainstream financial services. And then taking it more broadly, I think when we look back at the super complaint that the Citizens Advice made to the CMA a few years ago around the loyalty penalty in essential markets like mobile, broadband, mortgages, home insurance, and cash savings. I think it's following through and building on the work that CMA has done there to use this open data revolution to kind of tackle those oligopolies that still exist in the essential markets and drive up effective competition and prevent people from being stung really by staying with one provider. And I think that's what we've seen in Australia, who I think have gone from being years behind us to now have already overtaken us in terms of giving all of their citizens the right to access financial data, but also utility and telecoms data from next year onwards. So I think we need to recognize that the pace of change is being set by the Australians now. And if we want to compete on an international level in this post-Brexit world, then I think we need to get this right quite quickly.
And I think there's no better sort of galvanizing or clarion call, which is, you know, when you feel the heat from other sort of financial cities and centres around the world who are leading the way. But there are a couple of things that really sort of stick out for me from what you were saying there is about, you know, personal resilience as well as financial resilience, but also how, you know, kind of so often and this is something that I feel very passionate about, which is employers give money each month to their employees through their HR payroll systems. But it's almost like the education feels like it stops at that point. And having well-informed, financially literate employees as well as citizens can only be good for individuals and their communities and their corporates as well. So wonderful, thank you. Majeed, love to get your thoughts on this as well. So let's look ahead. Let's look ahead and look beyond. What do you think
one area
is going to, what's the greatest potential?
Information sharing and then the sharing economy as well. I don't want to call it the information sharing economy because that's not it, but and I suppose the sharing economy more and how that feeds into decarbonization. So across the Western world, you know, in Ireland, the UK, Europe, the States and so on, and many parts of Asia and Australia, as Claire alluded to, there's huge programs of work that are required for decarbonization, and there's a very big role for financial institutions to play within that, not just financing it, but also informing, working with utility companies, as you alluded to earlier, and various others to kind of get this decarbonization program and, you know, sustainability show on the road. And a lot of that is just behavioral, a lot of it is driving or trying to drive certain behaviors as opposed to just spending money on the right things and financing the right pieces of physical infrastructure and so on that need to happen. So I think that's one sort of area that open finance can play in, you know, in many different ways, and not just linked to a bank account. There's many other things as well. So for instance, the, you know, Internet of Things and how certain things are paid for, and, you know, I suppose adding efficiencies to that. So I think that is one thing that is certainly, I suppose, in the long term, or has the greatest future potential, is how does open finance play in the world of sustainability, of community sustainability, of, I suppose, the environment and that, and decarbonization.
And of course, with COP21 in Glasgow next year, it'll be very fascinating to see how the financial services world, the open finance discussion comes through into that. Because if the world is not awake now, I don't know when it ever will be about, you know, as you say, sustainability and climate change and carbonisation. Thank you. You've taken us right onto the highest level, which is fantastic. Thanks, Majeed. Thanks for your thoughts on that. And last but again, not least, Charlotte, from your point of view at BNP Paribas, looking at
I think what has been said is completely extremely interesting, and not only for the consumer view, but for the corporate and banks views as well. I think it's all about removing the complexity of today's world. Everything is so complex right now, with silos, with difficulty to connect and all of that. So I think with open banking, I mean, what I see as for the future is seamless experience for everyone. In corporates right now, they don't have this seamless navigation from one bank to another. They don't have this consolidated view of what is going on with all their banking partners in one place. So tomorrow it will be about that, but as well for SMEs, because small businesses right now are underserved. in some aspects of that as well. So I hope that across the scope, from large corporates to smaller business and then to individuals, we will be able to have a more seamless and integrated collaboration again, having the ability to do benchmark as well. Compare banks, our systems, as you can do for a smartphone. When you buy a smartphone, you want to have this visibility over the prices, the different features, all of that. Right now, it's not that easy. So I think all of that related to the customer experience, whether they are in a corporate or individual, I think it's all about unlock this potential.
It's really, I have to say, it's been the most fantastic conversation. Really, a relatively short period of time. We've not only talked about, tools and technologies and applications and models and infrastructures and ways in which to collaborate and come together. We've talked about it from ecosystem point of view, corporate point of view, wholesale point of view, retail, and also B2B, SME to huge corporates, and also, of course, unlocking new business opportunities, really unlocking the potential and having, Clare talk about the world of pensions, and then also how this can unlock greater financial inclusion, greater financial education, and then also to go up to the very highest of agendas, which is thinking about climate change and sustainability. It's been fantastic. Kate, Majeed, Clare, and Charlotte, thank you so much for all your thoughts. I hope the audience have enjoyed it as much as I have. I've been Julia Street.
Cheers.
Thanks for watching.